Hey everyone, welcome back to the garage where we're continuing work on my 1989 BMW 325i E30. Now in the last video we did a pretty big mechanical job. We replaced the timing belt, the water pump, and a lot of gaskets and seals. However, at the end of that video was sort of an underwhelming experience where the car didn't idle very well. You blip the throttle and the idles would drop, then when you close the throttle the idle would drop and then return to a sort of smooth-ish idle. Now I did ask you guys to try and guess what the problem might be that's causing this strange sort of throttle response issue. There are a lot of good guesses out there, and there was the idle control valve, there was possibly a vacuum leak. Unfortunately, the actual issue is a little bit more obscure than those sort of things. It's something that I didn't even catch until I was editing the last video and watching myself disassemble the car when I saw something out of the corner of my eye. If you go back to the video, it's about the 152 mark. You see me removing the spark plug wires. And yes, the issue is down to the spark plug wires I bought. The second red flag that I saw when putting the engine back together was that there was an electrical connector that had nothing going to it. I thought, well, maybe it's just one of those random connectors for an option that this car doesn't have. I mean, I've worked on plenty of cars in the past where there's just open connectors for things that nothing plugs into. Well, let's take a look at that connector. Then we'll go take a look at the old spark plug wires and see what I'm talking about. Going down here in the engine bay, there are two connectors that look kind of like this. It's a 3-pin connector, and there was one that had nothing going to it. And I thought that was odd, but again, I've worked on cars where nothing goes to a particular connector and everything is fine. But in this case, there is something that's supposed to go to this electrical connector. So over here on the bench, I have the old number 6 spark plug wire. You notice anything unique about this spark plug wire? That's right, there's some sort of pigtail coming off this. And what this is a pulse sensor that sends a signal back to the ECU through this connector and some sort of magnetic pickup that tells the ECU when this number 6 cylinder is firing. Now, I'm not 100% sure what the purpose of this is. Whatever it is, it does impact the running of the vehicle, as you could have seen from the previous video when this isn't installed. So as it turns out, the new set of spark plug wires that I ordered in fact doesn't fit my car to the T. I went back to the vendor I bought it from, and sure enough, when I plugged in my car's specs, it said that it did not fit. Unfortunately, it didn't call it out in big red letters and saying, hey, you shouldn't buy this because it doesn't fit your car. So I ended up buying it mistakenly. The actual wires are sold through BMW only, and they're like $140, and the wires that I bought were like $75. So it was considerable savings, and the only difference between the wires is the fact that the ones I bought don't come with this pulse sensor on the cylinder 6 spark plug. Knowing that this is required in order for the vehicle to run right, I had to figure out, all right, how am I going to get this off of the old spark plug wire and onto the new one? So I thought it over and I was like, well, I could just cut the old spark plug wire. That would be able to slide this thing off, and then possibly cut the new spark plug wire, slide it on, and then splice it back together. And I was thinking about going that route. So I bought this NGK cable splicer and I thought, oh yeah, this will work great. But then I started thinking more about it and it's like, do I really want to cut up a brand new spark plug wire that currently has no problems with it at all, other than the fact that this hasn't been slid over the wire? No, I didn't want to do that. So I dug in deeper and I started dissecting the old spark plug wires I had. I wanted to find out if there was a way to remove this boot end without actually cutting the wire itself. And I figured out how to do it. So I'm going to show you guys how to remove this spark plug wire boot and take off the connector on the end without actually damaging the wire at all. So let's dive right in and see how you do it. Okay, so the things you'll need to do this are some silicone spray, some needle nose pliers, and a really small flathead screwdriver. So to begin, we want to be able to slip this rubber boot off of the wire itself. So to do that, we must first free it from the wire. It's not actually glued in place or anything, it's just a tight fit rubber seal on the spark plug wire. So we use some silicone spray and just kind of douse both ends of the boot. Then use your small flat blade screwdriver and kind of let the silicone spray get inside of the sealing edge of the boot. And then we'll go on this side, just kind of open it up, spray some silicone spray in there. And we just want to work this around and try and free up the boot from the wire itself. Okay, so that silicone spray is pretty well distributed. Now we'll take our needle nose pliers and we'll kind of just grab this plastic piece on the inside. We don't want to grip it too hard, but just enough to keep the wire stationary while we try and move the boot around. We'll see that it'll eventually just kind of slide off like that. And we'll just slide the boot down the wire a little bit. And then here's something really neat. It's almost as if Bremmy, the maker of this spark plug wire, intended for this to be taken apart. So you'll see that we have this plastic connector down here, and then we have the rubber spark plug wire going into it. We just twist this and then pull out. There you go. It's literally a twist lock connector on these things. And then from there, we can just pull the spark plug boot off the end. And then we can pull our reference sensor off the end as well. Now, this connector needs to be crimped down just a tiny bit in order to get this off. So we'll just kind of snug it down a little bit. You just snake it through. It does take a little force, but it does come out, and there you go. Now let's head on over to the car and get this on the new spark plug wire. Okay, so we're gonna follow the exact same procedure as we did there on the bench with the old wire. First thing we need to do is find the cylinder 6 spark plug wire. So it's this one. The new spark plug wires actually came with these little tags that identify the wires. We'll just pop this off the ignition cap. And then again, we'll just spray it down with some silicone spray. Get our flat blade screwdriver in there and kind of help work it around on the inside. Shoot some silicone spray in there. Now we just get our pliers to hold that internal plastic connector to slide this boot off. Okay, so with this taken off, we see that this is actually a little bit different than the old style ones. Sometimes you just never know until you take it apart. This one's even less of a challenge because it doesn't screw on. It just literally spikes the end of this spark plug wire when you put it back in. So I guess all we do is just push that back on the end. So anyway, we slide off this little tag, and we slide on our pulse sensor. It really just goes over the top. Put it on like that. And we put back on our cylinder 6 designator. And we slide our spark plug boot back over the top of that. And this just has a spear screw-like thing that you just kind of slide back on and then twist back in place to make the connection. Then you just take your boot, slide it back over the top, push it back in, and then there you go. And then we plop this wire back in the distributor. And now we just route this wire kind of back under here. Sneak it under the thermostat housing. And then plug it into the connector on this side. Done. So there we are, mystery solved. Let's check out how it runs now. So as you can tell, this thing runs a whole heck of a lot better than it did before, but I'm still gonna go in there and check for vacuum leaks with my smoke machine just to make sure we can't make this thing run even better. Okay, so I've got the smoke test running. I've had it running for a little bit now, and I can see 2 places where I'm seeing smoke escape, and it's all near the throttle body. You can see that right here at the end of the throttle body where the hose that comes from the valve cover goes into the throttle body, there's quite a leak there. And then here at the end of the idle control valve, there's a significant leak going from there as well. All right, with those vacuum leaks discovered, I'm gonna try to go in there and fix them as best I can with RTV and Permatex number 2. These are both flexible sealers that should work pretty well for these small style vacuum leaks. The only other way to fix these is to actually go out and buy new parts. And I don't really feel like spending that sort of money right now. So again, we'll give this a try and see how it works. Okay, so with those vacuum leaks now addressed, it does seem like the engine does run a bit better than before. Now the main culprit here again was that pulse sensor on spark plug number 6, but those vacuum leaks certainly weren't helping anything either. Now you might be wondering, okay, so how did you find those vacuum leaks? What's this smoke tester machine that you were using? Well, let's take a look at it. That's it right there. As you can see, it's a pretty crude looking contraption. It looks kind of like a paint bucket because it is a paint bucket. And this thing, while you could certainly make it at home, I actually bought this pre-made off of eBay. I forget how much it cost. I bought it a while ago, but could put one of these together probably for less than $30. Let's go through how it works. So again, the main part of it is just a gallon paint bucket. This is where the smoke chamber kind of happens. So inside of this paint bucket, you fill it with mineral oil, just kind of the stuff you'd get at the pharmacy. And it's got this heating element inside of there. It's sort of a wick design, kind of like a gas lantern or something like that. This wick will heat up that mineral oil and create the smoke. That wick is powered by an external 12-volt battery source. So you've got these jumper cable looking things, and you just hook it up to an external battery. It's got a fuse protection block in there just so it doesn't overload itself. And then this smoke is forced out the top of this can through a hose right here, because you hook up a compressed air line to this. Just hook that up, and this right here is a regulator, and it regulates this at, I think it's like 2.5 psi or something like that. And that way you don't over pressurize the intake side of the engine. One of the most critical parts of using a smoke machine like this is sealing up the entrance where you're putting this into the intake. And I devised something. It's just a, actually it's just pulled off of a jelly jar. It's a 2 5/8 diameter, I believe. I drilled a hole in the middle of it and put a brass nipple that I got out of the plumbing section of the hardware store, and put 2 sealing washers on both sides, and put a lock nut on the inside. That way it just holds this in place and creates a nice seal. And this is the same diameter as the intake elbow on the engine, and then you just use the hose clamp on the intake elbow to seal it up, and it worked perfectly. Found those 2 vacuum leaks pretty fast. So I gotta say, putting something like this together, or even just going out and buying something like this, can save you a ton of time when diagnosing an idle issue on any vehicle, let alone one of these E30s. So it's definitely something nice to have in your garage if you're going to be dealing with a lot of old cars like I do. There you go. That's the machine. It's pretty simple, but very effective. So I know I said at the beginning of this video that we'd deal with the remaining mechanical issues on this car, but unfortunately we kind of ran long on this video, so we'll have to save that till next time. There's just a few things left to do, nothing that really impacts the overall running of the vehicle, but they're important all the same. Once we wrap up all those mechanical issues, we can start concentrating on the more cosmetic side of the car. And I'll tell you what, it's feeling good to finally get to this point. So there's lots to look forward to, and as always, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you guys again soon.